Home Alone, the disturbing true horror story of Brian Andrews. Brian Andrews was an ordinary teenager living in an ordinary suburb in the early 1980s. His neighborhood was a quiet, tree-lined area where nothing much ever happened, and everyone knew each other. The houses were modest but well kept, with manicured lawns and picket fences. It was the kind of place where people felt safe leaving their doors unlocked and their children playing outside until dusk. However, the events that unfolded during the summer of 1986 would shatter that sense of security for Brian and his family, leaving a scar on the community that never quite healed. Brian was a typical 15-year-old, spending his days riding his bike, playing video games, and hanging out with friends. His parents, John and Martha, were hard-working individuals who often worked late to make ends meet. This meant that Brian was frequently home alone, a situation he relished for the freedom it provided. But as the summer began, strange things started to happen. It began with small, almost imperceptible disturbances. One evening, Brian noticed that some items in his room had been moved. He dismissed it as his imagination or perhaps his mother tidying up while he wasn't paying attention. Then he started hearing strange noises at night. Scratching sounds, faint whispers, and footsteps that seemed to come from the attic. Again, he tried to rationalize them as the house settling or the wind playing tricks. One night, as Brian was lying in bed, he heard a noise that was too distinct to ignore. It sounded like a faint knock on his bedroom door. Frozen in fear, he waited, listening intently. The knock came again, this time louder. Gathering his courage, he called out, "Who's there?" There was no response, just an eerie silence that seemed to stretch on forever. He got up and opened the door, but there was nothing. No one in the hallway, no one in the house. He chalked it up to his overactive imagination and went back to bed, though sleep didn't come easily that night. As the days passed, the disturbances grew more frequent and harder to ignore. Brian began to find things out of place in the house, objects missing or turning up in odd locations. The sounds from the attic became a nightly occurrence, growing louder and more insistent. He told his parents, but they were skeptical, attributing his fears to teenage anxiety and the usual creaks and groans of an old house. One weekend, Brian's parents had to leave town for a work conference, leaving him alone for a couple of days. They reassured him that everything would be fine and left him with a list of emergency contacts. Brian was nervous but determined to prove he could handle being alone. The first night alone was uneventful, but the second night, everything changed. As Brian was watching TV, he heard the now familiar sounds coming from the attic. This time, they were accompanied by a low, guttural moaning. Fear gripped him, but he decided he couldn't ignore it any longer. Armed with a flashlight and a baseball bat, he climbed the narrow staircase to the attic. The attic was a dark, dusty space filled with old boxes and forgotten belongings. Brian's flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing nothing out of the ordinary. He was about to turn back when he noticed a small door at the far end of the attic, partially hidden behind some boxes. He had never seen it before. Trembling, he approached the door and opened it. Inside was a tiny, makeshift living space. There was a dirty mattress on the floor, a few tattered blankets, and an assortment of odd items, a half-eaten sandwich, a pile of old clothes, and some crude drawings on the wall. The realization hit him like a punch to the gut. Someone had been living in his attic. Brian fled the attic, locking the door behind him. He called his parents, who immediately contacted the police. When the officers arrived, they searched the house and the attic thoroughly. They found evidence that someone had indeed been living there for weeks, if not months. However, the intruder was gone, having seemingly vanished into thin air. The police investigation revealed a disturbing truth. A man named Daniel LaPlante, a local troublemaker with a history of breaking and entering, was identified as the likely intruder. He had been watching Brian and his family for some time, entering the house through an unlocked window and setting up his hideout in the attic. His motives were unclear, but it was evident that he had been spying on them and possibly planning something more sinister. Daniel LaPlante was eventually apprehended after another break-in in a nearby town. He was found hiding in the walls of a house, confirming the chilling reality that he had developed a method of living undetected in people's homes. His arrest brought a sense of relief to Brian and his family, but the psychological scars remained. The incident had a profound impact on Brian. He struggled with anxiety and insomnia, haunted by the thought that someone had been watching him in his most private moments. His family moved to a new house in a different town, seeking a fresh start. The community was also affected, with many residents installing security systems and becoming more vigilant about home security. The story of Brian Andrews and Daniel LaPlante is a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities we often overlook in our daily lives. It serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of vigilance and the unsettling reality that danger can sometimes be much closer than we think. For Brian, the ordeal was a harrowing chapter that forever changed his perception of safety and trust. As time passed, Brian slowly began to heal, but the memory of that summer never faded completely. It lingered in the back of his mind, a reminder of the fragility of security and the thin line between normalcy and horror. He went on to share his story with others, hoping to raise awareness about the importance of home security and the need to trust one's instincts. The true horror of Brian's experience lies not in the supernatural, but in the very real and disturbing actions of a fellow human being. It's a story that resonates deeply, highlighting the fears that many of us harbor about our own safety and the sanctity of our homes. In sharing his story, Brian provided a valuable lesson that we must remain vigilant, trust our instincts, and never take our security for granted. Home Alone, a disturbing true horror story. Introduction. Home should be a sanctuary, a place where one feels safest. However, the comfort and security associated with home can quickly unravel under certain circumstances, transforming it into a setting of terror and vulnerability. This essay recounts a disturbing true horror story experienced by Jane Miller, a young woman whose tranquil life was shattered by a series of terrifying events while she was home alone. This tale is not about ghosts or supernatural beings. It is about the real and often underestimated horrors that can emerge from human actions and vulnerabilities. Jane's life before the incident. Jane Miller was an ordinary woman in her mid-20s, living in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Ohio. She had recently moved into a charming single-story house, eager to start a new chapter of her life after a challenging breakup. The house, surrounded by a white picket fence and nestled among tall oak trees, symbolized a fresh beginning and the independence she sought. Jane worked as a freelance graphic designer, which allowed her to work from home. Her routine was predictable. She started her day with a morning jog, followed by hours at her desk, designing logos and websites for various clients. In the evenings, she often unwound by watching movies or reading novels. Her life was peaceful, predictable, and most importantly, safe. The first signs of trouble. The first sign of trouble appeared subtly. It was a chilly October evening when Jane noticed something odd. As she settled on her couch to watch a movie, she felt a strange sensation of being watched. Dismissing it as paranoia, she continued with her evening. However, the feeling persisted, gnawing at the edges of her consciousness. Over the next few days, Jane began to notice small but unsettling changes around her home. Objects seemed to move on their own, lights flickered inexplicably, and she occasionally heard faint, unidentifiable noises at night. Initially, she blamed these occurrences on her imagination and the natural creaks of an old house. But as the incidents grew more frequent and pronounced, her unease turned into fear. The intruder revealed. One night, Jane's worst fears were confirmed. She was working late in her home office when she heard a distinct, deliberate creak from the hallway. Her heart pounded as she listened intently, hoping it was just the house settling. But the sound persisted, growing louder and closer. Mustering her courage, Jane grabbed a heavy book as a makeshift weapon and slowly made her way to the hallway. What she saw next froze her in terror. A shadowy figure stood at the end of the hallway, partially illuminated by the dim light from the living room. The intruder, dressed in dark clothing, seemed just as startled to see her. For a moment, both stood motionless, locked in a silent standoff. Then, with a sudden burst of speed, the intruder fled through the back door, disappearing into the night. Shaken and trembling, Jane immediately called the police. The officers who arrived conducted a thorough search of the house and its surroundings, but found no sign of the intruder. They assured Jane that it was likely a one-time incident, perhaps an attempted burglary, and advised her to enhance her home security. Escalation of terror. Despite the police's reassurances, Jane's sense of security was shattered. She installed new locks, added security cameras, and even adopted a large dog named Max for added protection. For a while, things seemed to return to normal, and Jane began to feel a semblance of safety. However, the respite was short-lived. A few weeks later, Jane began to receive anonymous, threatening messages. At first, they were notes left on her doorstep, warning her to leave the house. Then came the phone calls, silent at first, but gradually growing more menacing. The caller would describe her daily activities in chilling detail, proving that she was being watched closely. Jane reported these incidents to the police, but without concrete evidence, there was little they could do. The sense of being constantly observed and the inability to identify her tormentor drove Jane to the brink of a nervous breakdown. She began to doubt everyone around her, suspecting even her neighbors and acquaintances. The climax of horror. The situation reached its terrifying climax one stormy night in December. Jane was awakened by Max's frantic barking. As she rushed to calm him, she noticed the security system's alarm was blaring, indicating a breach. Heart-pounding, she grabbed her phone and dialed 911, then armed herself with a kitchen knife. Cautiously, she moved through the house, her senses on high alert. She found the back door wide open, swinging in the wind. As she approached, she heard footsteps behind her. Whirling around, she came face to face with the intruder, a man wearing a ski mask and brandishing a knife. A struggle ensued, with Jane fighting desperately to protect herself. She managed to slash the intruder's arm, causing him to drop his knife. Just as he regained his footing, a sound of police sirens filled the air. The intruder fled once more, vanishing into the stormy night. This time, however, the police arrived quickly enough to launch a thorough search. The aftermath. The intruder, identified as a local man with a history of mental illness and criminal behavior, was eventually caught and arrested. The investigation revealed that he had been stalking Jane for months, watching her every move from a hidden vantage point in the woods behind her house. He had even managed to break into her home multiple times, leaving behind the unsettling signs that had initially alarmed her. The ordeal left Jane deeply traumatized. She moved out of the house and sought therapy to deal with the lasting psychological impact of the events. The sense of violation and fear took a long time to fade, but with the support of her friends, family, and professional help, she slowly began to rebuild her life. Conclusion. Jane Miller's story is a harrowing reminder of the real dangers that can lurk even in the safest of places. It underscores the importance of vigilance, the need for robust personal security, and the resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable terror. Her experience serves as a cautionary tale, urging us all to be aware of our surroundings and to take proactive measures to protect ourselves from the unseen threats that may be closer than we think. Home Alone. A disturbing true horror story. Introduction. In the heart of suburban America, safety is often taken for granted. Streets lined with manicured lawns and white picket fences exude an aura of security, lulling residents into a false sense of invincibility. This sense of security was shattered for one family in a quiet neighborhood of Waukesha, Wisconsin in the fall of 2019. What began as an ordinary evening for 16-year-old Emily Collins turned into a harrowing night of terror that would forever alter her perception of safety and the sanctity of home. The setting. Emily Collins was a typical teenager, balancing school, sports, and a part-time job at a local cafe. Her parents, John and Karen Collins, were hard-working professionals, and her younger brother, Ethan, was a spirited 10-year-old. Their two-story colonial house on Seaver Lane was more than just a home. It was a sanctuary where memories were made and the worries of the outside world were kept at bay. The calm before the storm. On a chilly Friday evening in October, the Collins family prepared for a weekend getaway to celebrate their wedding anniversary. Emily, who had a soccer game the following morning, opted to stay behind. Used to being home alone and mature for her age, Emily assured her parents that she would be fine on her own for the night. They left her with a detailed list of emergency contacts and a promise to call and check in. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Emily settled in for a quiet night. She planned to binge-watch her favorite TV series and catch up on some homework. After a quick dinner, she locked all the doors, checked the windows, and set the alarm system her parents had recently installed. The house felt secure, a fortress against any external threat. The first signs of trouble. At around 9 p.m., as Emily was engrossed in her show, she heard a faint noise coming from the kitchen. Assuming it was just the house settling or perhaps the wind, she brushed it off. However, when the noise persisted, a chill ran down her spine. She paused the show and listened intently. The noise was subtle, like the sound of something brushing against a window. Trying to remain calm, Emily decided to investigate. She walked through the dimly lit house, her footsteps echoing off the hardwood floors. In the kitchen, she saw nothing out of the ordinary. Relieved, she turned to go back to the living room, when a loud thud made her freeze in her tracks. It came from the basement. Fear takes hold. The basement was Emily's least favorite part of the house. Even during the day, it had an eerie atmosphere with its unfinished walls and flickering fluorescent lights. She considered calling her parents but didn't want to worry them unnecessarily. Summoning her courage, she grabbed a flashlight from a drawer and made her way to the basement door. Each step down the creaky wooden stairs amplified her anxiety. When she reached the bottom, she shone the flashlight around the room. Everything seemed in place, except for a small window near the ceiling that was slightly ajar. It was just large enough for someone to squeeze through. Her heart raced as she realized the window hadn't been like that before. Emily quickly shut the window and secured it with the latch. She hurried back upstairs, locking the basement door behind her. Trying to shake off her fear, she convinced herself that the wind must have blown the window open. She returned to the living room, hoping to distract herself with her show. The intruder revealed. Just as Emily was starting to relax, she heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps. They were slow and deliberate, coming from upstairs. Panic surged through her as she realized she wasn't alone. She immediately grabbed her phone and dialed 911, whispering her address and the situation to the dispatcher. The operator assured her that police were on their way and instructed her to stay hidden. Emily hid in a closet near the front door, clutching her phone and listening intently. The footsteps grew louder, descending the stairs. She heard the distinct creak of the floorboards in the hallway. The intruder was getting closer. Through a small crack in the closet door, she could see a shadow moving across the living room. A desperate struggle. The minutes felt like hours as Emily waited in terror. The intruder, a tall man dressed in dark clothing, seemed to be searching for something. He moved methodically, checking rooms and looking behind furniture. When he approached the closet where Emily was hiding, she held her breath, praying he wouldn't find her. As he reached for the closet door, Emily's phone buzzed with a message from the police, notifying her that officers were nearby. The sound alerted the intruder, who flung the door open. In a split second, Emily sprang into action, using all her strength to push past him and run towards the front door. The intruder grabbed her arm, but adrenaline fueled her escape. She kicked and screamed, managing to break free and dash out the front door just as the police arrived. The officers quickly apprehended the intruder, who turned out to be a recently paroled convict with a history of burglary and assault. The aftermath. The ordeal left Emily shaken but unharmed. Her parents returned home immediately, overwhelmed with relief and gratitude that their daughter was safe. The police commended Emily for her bravery and quick thinking, which undoubtedly saved her life. In the weeks that followed, Emily struggled with anxiety and insomnia. The sense of safety she once felt in her home was shattered. Her parents invested in additional security measures, including surveillance cameras and reinforced locks, but the emotional scars took longer to heal. Reflections. Emily's experience is a stark reminder that even in the seemingly safest of environments, danger can lurk. Her story serves as a cautionary tale about the importance of preparedness and vigilance. It underscores the value of teaching children and teenagers how to respond in emergencies and the critical role of community and law enforcement in ensuring public safety. Today, Emily is a strong advocate for home security awareness. She shares her story with others, hoping to educate and empower them. Her message is clear: never take safety for granted, and always be prepared for the unexpected. Climax months passed, but Emily's anxiety lingered. She found solace in sharing her story and advocating for better security. One night, while attending a local safety seminar, she met Officer Davis, one of the officers who had responded to her 911 call. He offered her a ride home, and they discussed the importance of community safety. Arriving at her house, they noticed the front door slightly ajar. Emily's heart raced, but Officer Davis remained calm. He instructed her to stay in the car and called for backup. Moments later, they entered the house together. The familiar sounds of creaking floorboards and distant rustling sent shivers down Emily's spine. Suddenly, a figure darted out from the shadows, attempting to escape. Davis tackled the intruder, revealing him to be a local man with a troubled past. This second incident, while terrifying, reaffirmed Emily's commitment to safety. It also brought closure, knowing that her advocacy had helped make her community more vigilant. Denouement. In the aftermath of this second intrusion, Emily's story gained national attention. She was invited to speak at various forums, and her advocacy led to several neighborhoods implementing improved security measures. The Collins family fortified their home even further and developed a stronger bond with their neighbors. Emily's resilience became a beacon of hope and empowerment for many. She continued her education, focusing on criminal justice, and dreamed of a career in law enforcement to help others as she had been helped. Through her ordeal, Emily learned that while fear can be paralyzing, it can also be a powerful motivator for change. Her journey from a terrified teenager to a confident young advocate showed that even in the darkest times, one can find strength and purpose. Conclusion. The Collins family's nightmare on Seaver Lane was a wake-up call for their entire community. It highlighted vulnerabilities that many suburban families overlook and sparked conversations about safety and security measures. While the physical and emotional impact of that night will always be a part of Emily's life, she has chosen to use her experience as a force for good, transforming her fear into a powerful tool for awareness and prevention. In doing so, she hopes to ensure that no one else has to endure the terror of being home alone and in danger. Home Alone, a disturbing true horror story. When we think of horror stories, our minds often conjure images of haunted houses, malevolent spirits, and supernatural entities. However, some of the most chilling tales are grounded in reality, where the terror comes not from ghosts, but from human actions and real-world events. This is one such story, a disturbing account of a home alone experience that turned into a nightmare. The setting. The story takes place in a quiet suburban neighborhood in the town of Springfield, Illinois. The area was known for its peaceful streets, friendly neighbors, and low crime rates. It was the kind of place where people felt safe leaving their doors unlocked, where children played outside until dusk, and where the community gathered for barbecues and block parties. However, beneath this veneer of tranquility, darkness lurked, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. The protagonist. Our protagonist is a 17-year-old high school student named Emily Harris. Emily was a bright, responsible teenager who excelled in her studies and was well liked by her peers. Her parents, Mark and Linda Harris, both worked demanding jobs. Mark was a software engineer and Linda was a nurse. Despite their busy schedules, they were a close-knit family who made time for each other. Emily, being the eldest of 3 siblings, often took on a caretaker role for her younger brother, Jake, and sister, Lily. One summer evening, Mark and Linda decided to attend an anniversary party for one of Mark's colleagues. They planned to be gone for the night, leaving Emily in charge. It was not the first time Emily had been left home alone with the siblings, and she felt confident in her ability to look after them. The night begins. The evening started off uneventfully. Emily prepared dinner for Jake and Lily, and the 3 of them ate together while watching their favorite TV shows. After dinner, Emily helped the siblings with their bedtime routines and tucked them into bed by 9 p.m. With the house quiet and her siblings asleep, Emily settled into the living room to catch up on her homework. Around 10:30 p.m., Emily received a text from her parents, letting her know they would be home around midnight. She replied, assuring them that everything was fine. Little did she know, the tranquility of the evening was about to be shattered. The first sign. At 11 p.m., as Emily was engrossed in her studies, she heard a strange noise coming from the back of the house. It sounded like a faint tapping on the window. She dismissed it as the wind or perhaps a tree branch brushing against the glass. However, the noise persisted, growing louder and more insistent. Unease began to creep into her mind. Curious but cautious, Emily decided to investigate. She grabbed her phone and a flashlight before making her way to the back of the house. As she approached the window in the kitchen, the tapping stopped. Emily shone her flashlight outside, but saw nothing unusual. Convincing herself it was just her imagination, she returned to the living room. The intruder. Minutes later, the noise returned, this time accompanied by the unmistakable sound of footsteps on the gravel driveway. Emily's heart raced. She texted her parents, informing them of the strange noises, but received no immediate response. She decided to check the front of the house, hoping to find a rational explanation. As she peered through the peephole of the front door, she saw a shadowy figure standing at the edge of the driveway. It was a tall man wearing a dark hoodie, his face obscured. Panic set in. Emily double-checked the locks on all the doors and windows, ensuring everything was secure. She then called the police, her voice trembling as she explained the situation. The dispatcher assured her that officers were on their way and advised her to stay on the line. Emily grabbed a kitchen knife for protection and retreated to her bedroom, locking the door behind her. She could hear her siblings stirring in their sleep, oblivious to the danger outside. The encounter. As Emily waited for the police, she heard a new sound, the back door rattling, as if someone was trying to force it open. She whispered into the phone, informing the dispatcher of the development. The dispatcher told her to stay calm and keep the line open. Suddenly, there was a loud crash. The intruder had shattered a window and was now inside the house. Emily's blood ran cold. She could hear the intruder's heavy footsteps as he moved through the kitchen, making his way towards the living room. Desperate to protect her siblings, Emily quietly moved to their rooms, waking them and guiding them into her bedroom. She barricaded the door with furniture, hoping to buy some time. The intruder's footsteps grew louder as he approached the hallway. Emily clutched the knife tightly, her heart pounding in her chest. The arrival of the police. Just as the intruder reached Emily's bedroom door, they heard the sound of sirens approaching. The intruder hesitated, then fled the house through the broken window. Moments later, the police arrived, storming the house and securing the perimeter. The officers found Emily and her siblings huddled together in her bedroom, shaken but unharmed. They conducted a thorough search of the house and the surrounding area, but were unable to locate the intruder. The police took statements from Emily and her parents, who had rushed home after receiving her frantic messages. The aftermath. The following days were a blur of police interviews and security consultations. The Harris family installed a state-of-the-art security system, complete with cameras and motion sensors. Despite the increased security, the sense of safety they once felt in their home was irrevocably damaged. The intruder was never caught, and the motive behind the break-in remained a mystery. The police speculated it could have been a burglary attempt or something more sinister. The uncertainty only added to the family's anxiety. Emily struggled with nightmares and anxiety in the weeks following the incident. She found it difficult to concentrate at school and often felt on edge. Her parents arranged for her to see a therapist, who helped her work through her trauma. Over time, Emily began to recover, but the experience left a lasting mark on her psyche. Reflection. This story serves as a stark reminder that horror doesn't always stem from the supernatural. Sometimes, the most terrifying experiences are rooted in reality. The sense of violation and vulnerability that comes with a home invasion can have profound psychological effects, disrupting the very foundation of one's sense of security. For the Harris family, the ordeal was a wake-up call. They learned the importance of vigilance and the need for effective security measures. More importantly, they realized the value of community and the support it can offer in times of crisis. Their neighbors rallied around them, offering assistance and solidarity, which played a crucial role in their healing process. Conclusion. Emily's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. Despite facing a harrowing experience, she emerged stronger and more aware of the world around her. The incident also highlighted the importance of mental health support in the aftermath of trauma, underscoring the need for accessible resources for those who endure such experiences. In a world where the line between safety and danger can be thin, Emily's story is a sobering reminder that real-life horror can strike when we least expect it. It urges us to remain vigilant, to cherish the safety of our homes, and to support each other in times of need. For the Harris family, the terror they faced that summer night will never be forgotten, but their ability to come together and rebuild their sense of security is a powerful example of human resilience in the face of true horror. Introduction. In the quiet suburbs of Omaha, Nebraska, the summer of 2015 was memorable for all the wrong reasons. For Sarah, a 23-year-old college student home for the break, it became a period of terror and resilience that she would never forget. This is her story, a chilling reminder that sometimes the greatest horrors can come from the living. The setup: Sarah lived in a picturesque two-story house with her parents and younger brother. That summer, her parents decided to take a much-needed vacation to Europe, leaving Sarah in charge of the house. Her brother, Tim, had gone to a summer camp, leaving Sarah alone for the first time in her life. Excited by the prospect of independence, Sarah initially reveled in her solitude. She enjoyed the freedom to stay up late watching movies, cooking elaborate meals, and inviting friends over. However, as the days passed, the novelty wore off, and she started feeling a vague sense of unease. The first sign. It began innocuously. One evening, as Sarah was preparing dinner, she noticed that a window in the living room was slightly ajar. She distinctly remembered closing it earlier that day. Shrugging it off as her own forgetfulness, she locked it and went about her evening. A few nights later, Sarah woke up to the sound of creaking floorboards. She brushed it off as the house settling, but the sounds persisted, becoming more distinct each night. On the fourth night, she heard a soft thud coming from the attic. Her heart pounded as she lay in bed, straining to listen. After a few minutes of silence, she convinced herself it was just an animal, and went back to sleep. A growing fear. The next morning, Sarah decided to investigate the attic. She found nothing unusual except for a slight, almost imperceptible draft. She dismissed it, thinking it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. However, a sense of security was shattered later that evening when she found the back door unlocked. Sarah was meticulous about locking doors, especially since she was alone. Panic set in, and she called her best friend Lisa, who came over to spend the night. They laughed off the incidents as coincidences, but Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The break-in. 2 weeks into her parents' absence, the unthinkable happened. Sarah came home from a grocery run to find the house in disarray. Drawers were pulled out, and items were strewn across the floor. Her heart raced as she grabbed her phone to call the police. The officers arrived quickly and conducted a thorough search, but found no one. They told her it was likely a break-in attempt and advised her to stay with friends until her parents returned. Despite their advice, Sarah was determined to stay in her own home. She installed additional locks and set up makeshift alarms using pots and pans. Her parents, worried, shortened their trip and planned to return in a week. The horrifying discovery. One night, unable to sleep, Sarah decided to bake cookies to calm her nerves. As she waited for the cookies to bake, she heard the faint sound of scratching. It was coming from the basement. Grabbing a kitchen knife, she cautiously made her way downstairs. To her horror, she found a small, hidden door behind a stack of boxes. It was slightly ajar. With trembling hands, she pushed it open and discovered a crawl space. Inside, there were signs of someone living there, discarded food wrappers, a dirty blanket, and even a notebook. She backed away, her mind racing. Someone had been living in her house, watching her every move. She called the police, who arrived within minutes. They conducted a thorough search and found the intruder, a disheveled man in his 30s, hiding in the crawl space. He was arrested and later identified as a drifter with a history of mental illness. The aftermath. The discovery left Sarah traumatized. She moved in with Lisa for the remainder of the summer, unable to face the house alone. Her parents returned, horrified by what had happened. They installed a state-of-the-art security system and reinforced all entry points to ensure it never happened again. Sarah struggled with anxiety and nightmares for months. She sought therapy to help cope with the trauma and slowly began to reclaim her sense of security. The incident left a lasting impact on her life, a constant reminder of how quickly safety can be shattered. Conclusion. Sarah's story is a sobering tale of vulnerability and resilience. It underscores the importance of vigilance and the unpredictable nature of human threats. While she eventually found peace, the memory of that summer remains a chilling reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the most unexpected places. This true account is not just a story of terror, but also one of survival and the strength to overcome unimaginable fear. It serves as a powerful lesson. Sometimes, the real monsters are not those from our nightmares, but the ones who hide in the shadows of our everyday lives. Home Alone. A disturbing true horror story. Introduction. It was an ordinary summer evening in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Sarah Johnson, a 23-year-old recent college graduate, had just moved into her first apartment. The sense of independence was exhilarating. However, what unfolded one fateful night transformed her excitement into a harrowing tale of survival that she would recount for years to come. This is a true story of a nightmarish encounter, emphasizing the importance of personal safety and vigilance. The setup. Sarah's apartment was nestled in a peaceful cul-de-sac, surrounded by friendly neighbors. Her parents had helped her move in, making sure she was settled and had everything she needed. It was a well-maintained building with secure entrances, and the area was known for its low crime rate. Sarah felt safe and confident living alone for the first time. As a freelance graphic designer, Sarah often worked late into the night. Her job required a quiet, solitary environment, which her new apartment perfectly provided. The first few weeks went by without incident. She quickly adapted to her new routine, relishing the tranquility of her personal space. The unsettling prelude. One evening in mid-July, Sarah was deeply engrossed in her work. It was around 10 p.m. when she noticed something unusual: the sound of footsteps outside her apartment door. She lived on the 3rd floor, and it was uncommon for anyone to be in the hallway at that hour. Initially, she dismissed it, attributing it to one of her neighbors. However, the footsteps continued, pacing back and forth. Sarah's curiosity turned into unease. She quietly approached the door and peered through the peephole. To her surprise, no one was there. She stood there for a few moments, her heart racing, before returning to her desk. The footsteps had stopped, and she convinced herself it was nothing to worry about. The first encounter. A few nights later, Sarah was awoken by a soft but persistent knocking on her door. Groggy and disoriented, she glanced at her clock. It was 2:30 a.m. Her initial reaction was to ignore it, but the knocking persisted, growing slightly louder and more insistent. She wrapped herself in a robe and tiptoed to the door. Through the peephole, she saw a man she didn't recognize. He appeared to be in his late 30s, disheveled and anxious. He knocked again, whispering something she couldn't make out. Alarmed, she backed away from the door and grabbed her phone to call the police. As she did, the knocking abruptly ceased, and when she returned to the peephole, the man was gone. The police arrived quickly, but the man was nowhere to be found. They reassured Sarah that they would patrol the area more frequently and advised her to keep her doors locked and to call them if anything suspicious happened again. Escalation. The following week, Sarah couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. Her previously serene apartment began to feel like a cage. She installed additional locks on her doors and windows, and purchased a security camera for her front door. The sense of security these measures provided was fleeting. One night, as Sarah was reviewing some designs on her computer, she heard a scraping noise coming from the fire escape outside her kitchen window. Her blood ran cold. She turned off her monitor and lights, hoping to remain unnoticed. Peering through a crack in the blinds, she saw the same man from before, trying to pry open her window. Terrified, Sarah dialed 911 and whispered her situation to the operator. The man struggled with the window for what felt like an eternity before the sound of approaching sirens scared him away. The police arrived moments later, but once again, the intruder had vanished into the night. The breaking point. The police took Sarah's situation more seriously after this incident. They increased their patrols and advised her on additional security measures. Despite their efforts, the man continued to terrorize her. He would leave disturbing messages on her doorstep, written in a crude, almost childlike handwriting. The messages varied from pleas for help to ominous threats. One evening, Sarah returned home from running errands to find her apartment door slightly ajar. Panic set in as she realized the intruder might still be inside. She quietly backed away and called the police, who arrived swiftly and entered the apartment with their guns drawn. They found no one inside, but the sense of violation was overwhelming. The intruder had rifled through her belongings, leaving her bedroom in disarray. The confrontation. Sarah knew she couldn't continue living in fear. She decided to stay with a friend while the police conducted their investigation. They advised her to change her routine and consider moving to a more secure location. Sarah was reluctant to leave her new home, but understood the necessity. A week later, while gathering her remaining belongings from the apartment, Sarah experienced the most terrifying encounter yet. It was late afternoon, and she was alone. As she packed, she heard the unmistakable sound of her front door being unlocked. Her heart pounded as she realized the intruder had a key. Thinking quickly, she grabbed her phone and locked herself in the bathroom, dialing 911. The operator stayed on the line with her as she heard the intruder moving through the apartment, calling out her name in a chilling sing-song voice. Minutes later, she heard the police burst in, followed by a struggle and shouts. Resolution. The police apprehended the intruder, who turned out to be a former tenant of the apartment complex. He had suffered from severe mental health issues and had fixated on Sarah, believing she was someone from his past. The key he used was one he had never returned when he moved out. Sarah's ordeal was over, but the emotional scars remained. She decided to move back in with her parents temporarily, seeking therapy to deal with the trauma. The police provided her with all the support she needed, and the apartment complex overhauled their security measures to prevent such incidents in the future. Conclusion. Sarah's story is a chilling reminder of the importance of personal safety and vigilance. Despite living in a secure neighborhood and taking precautions, she found herself in a nightmare situation. Her experience underscores the need for robust security measures and the importance of mental health support to prevent similar incidents. This true account of terror serves as a wake-up call for all who live alone. It's a testament to the strength of the human spirit and the importance of community and support in overcoming such ordeals. Sarah's bravery and quick thinking, combined with the dedication of law enforcement, ultimately ensured her safety and brought her tormentor to justice.